Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends. This morning, Wizards of the Coast spoiled the entire Modern Masters 2015 set, so we now know what all the cards are, and that means we can start our set review. Today, we'll be looking specifically at the white cards, but if you haven't had a chance yet, this is a good time to subscribe to the channel. Over the course of the next 5 days, we'll look at each color individually. Then on the 6th day, we'll look at all the other cards in the set, and after 6 days, we'll have the entire set reviewed and done. So having said that, we got a lot of cards to look at, so let's just jump in to the first one, Apostle's Blessing. And let me start off with a disclaimer. All these cards are pretty much good cards. Obviously, you're going to play different cards in different limited strategies, and we'll talk about that as we go through. And I'm going to try to focus on limited strategies mostly, since we know most of these cards are good and constructed for the most part. So anyway, Apostle's Blessing. If you've played with Center Soul and Dragons, if you played with Feast of Resistance and Cons, you know how good this effect can be. This one takes it even a step further because not only can you protect your creature against any color, but you can also protect your creature against artifacts. And on top of that, you can go ahead and pay 2 life instead of the white in the casting cost and basically play this for 1 mana if you need to. So this is a fantastic card. It's going to be an awesome support card, almost an auto include if you're playing white as a defensive card. This card is Arrest, and those of you who are familiar with pacifism and those type of effects, you know this is a good card. Now you're paying 1 more than you would for pacifism, but you're getting something good out of it. Now the creature that you play it on can't attack or block, but also activated abilities can't be activated, and that is a pretty big deal a lot of the times. Battle Grace Angel. So here's a card with Exalted, and honestly, there's not a whole lot of cards with Exalted in the set, but they picked ones where it kind of makes sense and matters. So in this case, the Exalted bonus also is going to go along with Lifelink. So if she's attacking on her own, you have a 5/5 Lifelinker attacking, or if another creature is attacking on its own, it gets the Lifelink. So this is a very powerful card. Some could argue it outclasses Sarah Angel. Maybe it does. It just depends on what kind of deck and if you need her for the defense with the Vigilance. But this is a really fantastic card, and it's going to be really fun to play with and very affordable at 5 mana. Celestial Purge. So you'll see these color hosing cards in here as well. In Dragons of Tarkir, we saw a whole cycle of very aggressively costed color hosing cards. Well, this was kind of the original cycle of very aggressively costed color hosing cards. So this one made the cut. Costs you simply 2 for an instant to exile black or red permanent, not creature, but permanent. So pretty awesome. And you just have high power level in this set, as you're going to see as we go. So you need high power level removal. So cards like this, yeah, this is going to start in your sideboard naturally. But when you are against a black or red matchup and you're playing white, this is going to be awesome. Conclave Phalanx. And here's Convoke. And I think this is the only Convoke card I saw in the set spoiler. I could be wrong, but hey, that's fine. It just gives you an opportunity to kind of use some of the token strategies, which you'll see there's a lot of token strategies in Modern Masters. So now you can use your tokens to help cast the spell, and it gains you life, and it's a good defender. So this is going to be great against aggressive decks. It's going to be fantastic against burn, just help you reset that clock and get some of your life back, and hopefully you'll be able to cast it pretty quickly as long as you have a couple small creatures into play. Homunculus. I always liked this card when it came out. I think it was Shards of Alara when it originally came out. It's a 1 white for a 1/1, but if you have another artifact into play, because he does count as an artifact himself, that's an important thing to note, he's a 2/2. So that's a pretty aggressive card. If you have maybe an artifact that's helping you cast your mana, maybe an artifact land, which there is at least one, there's 2 actually in this set, which we'll see later. That's kind of awesome and kind of powerful. So I always like this guy in an aggressive build. Daybreak Cornet. This card is just needed a reprint desperately. Big commander card. It does see some play in modern hexproof decks. It's awesome. If you're playing with that aura hexproof strategy at all, this card just can take over a game, giving a creature +3/+3, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. It's just ridiculous. So I'm super happy to see this thing reprinted. It was in Future Sight originally, so this is the first time we're seeing it with new art and without the Future Sight border. And I think it looks pretty nice. I do like the Future Sight card a lot, the look of it, but this is just fine as well. Dispatch, and this is a Metalcraft card. I don't want to say exclusively, but with all the other good cards to choose from, if you're not playing Metalcraft, you're probably not going to include this in your deck. The one white to instantly tap a creature is fine, but there's just so many more powerful things you could be doing in this set than putting that in. Now, if you have Metalcraft and you're playing an artifact deck, well, absolutely, you basically get a Swords of Plowshares with no drawback, so then that card becomes crazy good. Eleanor and Grand Cenobite. And she was spoiled yesterday. I talked a lot about her in my spoiler video. But I will tell you just quickly again, this card is amazing. Desperately need a reprint. Got very, very expensive. Another huge commander card. Great commander. This card, if you're playing against a creature deck, especially like White Weenie or tokens, it just decimates those decks. If you have a deck with a lot of creature base, it's going to pump your guys. And even if you just play her, she's still a huge creature with vigilance. This card is just super awesome. Fortify, and here's a combat trick. There's some great combat tricks in this set. This is one of them. It only costs 3, and it can either be an aggressive combat trick or it can be a defensive combat trick. So either way, that versatility is pretty huge. Hikari Twilight Guardian. So this is interesting. We go into kind of a spirit and arcane sub-theme here. Honestly, there's not a whole lot of spirit and arcane, but there are changelings, which would also count as spirits. So you want to keep that in mind. So this card can kind of blink, which is nice, but aside from all that, it's a 4/4 flyer for 5, and it's fantastic. And if you happen to get some bonus from spirits or arcanes, blinking it, awesome. If not, then that's fine too. Indomitable Archangel. And here's another card, even if I'm not playing Metalcraft, it's a 4/4 flyer for 4. Yeah, sure, why not? That's an awesome card. If I am playing Metalcraft, even better. It's going to help give protection to my artifacts. Really fantastic card, especially in the Metalcraft deck, but really any white deck can probably run this. Ona, Shield of Ameria. The only drawback to her is she is very pricey, being 3 white and 6 colorless. However, there's a lot of ways in this set, and we're going to see them later, but not to get too far ahead of ourselves. There's a lot of ways to get extra mana, especially colorless mana. There's a lot of ways to get, say, dual lands that are going to help us get the colors we need. So not impossible. She is obviously not going to be seen a whole lot being at the mythic slot, but if you do open her, you might be able to play her. And if you do get her on the table, you're probably going to win, more than likely. But more importantly, I think this card just needed a reprint because, again, it just has a lot of really strong implications, for Commander as well as other casual formats. She's a great cube card too, a really awesome cube card to include in your cube. So good to see her back again. Kami of Ancient Law, and this is sort of your Grizzly Bear that also can be sacrificed if you need to get rid of an enchantment. So, hey, Grizzly Bears are fine. I'll pay 2 for a 2/2 and a little bit extra upside. Nothing wrong with that. And it's also a spirit, which could matter. Core Duelist, and you'll see a few more cards like this. These, white in general, and a lot of the creatures you'll see are kind of meant to have synergy with artifacts. So I think the idea here is there is a white/artifact deck that you can draft and build, and this kind of falls into that. It's a 1/1 for 1, which is just okay, but then you can go ahead and equip it for double strike. And if you equip it with, say, a Sunforger or something, now it becomes like a 5/1 double strike. Yeah, that's good. So look for those synergies, definitely in the limited game. Leyline of Sanctity, another card that desperately needed a reprint. It was just going to get out of control price-wise. This card in the constructed modern format is a huge burn hoser, obviously. Burn decks in modern usually play a little bit of green, mostly because of this card, and sometimes primarily because of this card. Once you know you're up against burn, you can, as long as you're playing white, obviously, you can go ahead and, yeah, you know what, even if you're not playing white, I've seen people board it in, and they don't even have a way to cast it, but their plan is to basically draw it, or mulligan until they draw it, and get it out on the battlefield, and just make an obstacle for burn. It's that popular of a sideboard card. In the limited game, it's still going to be in your sideboard. I mean, if you do run across somebody who ends up with like a whole bunch of lightning bolts or something, it might not be bad to side in against that type of strategy, but it's probably going to be a little less useful in limited, unless it's a niche circumstance. But awesome card, really glad that it's here. This card is Mighty Leap, and if you've ever played with this in the past, you know this is an excellent combat trick. You can either use it to have a creature jump up and fly and get some damage across, or you can, of course, use it just for the +2/+2 for either blocking or in combat when you're attacking. It's just so versatile and just so good. It's a really awesome combat trick. Next is Mirran Crusader, and this is a fine card. You're going to pay 3 for a 2/2 double strike and protection from black and green? Absolutely, this is awesome. This card gets even better, though, with that artifact synergy. There's a lot of great equipment that's going to help pump this and make this double striker even bigger. So watch out for those opportunities, but really fine card. Mirror Entity. So if you played with this in the Lorwyn block, you'll remember, especially in Limited, this thing is a house. This can just change a game. Let's say I draw this late game, and maybe I have 4 or 5 creatures on the board, and I play this for 3, and it doesn't tap to use its ability. Automatically, I can just pump my entire team. This card's crazy, and it can just, out of nowhere, change the dynamic of a game. Really awesome limited card. I'm sure it sees play in Modern, although I couldn't really think of any decks right away, but it's fantastic, and it's going to be really fun and limited. Moonlit Strider. This always felt to me kind of like the fixed version of Mother of Runes. It gives protection from a color of your choice basically one time, and then you sacrifice it. But it's also a pretty good blocker as well for 4. And with the Soul Shift ability, even if you sacrifice it, hopefully you'll get some value out of it. So really good card, even if you can only use it once. And having it on the battlefield itself is a deterrent and kind of sometimes holds your opponent back and makes them have to really think about if they want to throw away a spell to get to another spell. So it's another really fine card. Mirrorsmith, and this is kind of the token generator card for white. You'll see other colors have more token strategies, but it seems to touch just about every color in some capacity. So it's a 2/1, and whenever you cast an artifact spell, again, there's the artifact synergy, you can pay another mana to get a 1/1 colorless Mer token into play. If you're really strong with artifacts, especially a lot of cheap ones, this can kind of get out of control fast. Oblivion Ring, and this is another really high power removal card for a high power set. So this works on any non-land permanent. So you just want to keep that in mind. When you cast, the only thing about Oblivion Ring, it's an enchantment. So when you cast it, if it's not countered, so if it's on the stack, and say your opponent destroys their own creature that you were going to cast the Oblivion Ring on, then it resolves. You still have to play it on something, so that might become your own card. So just something to think about with Oblivion Ring. It's a really odd card, and the reason it doesn't see print anymore in standard sets is because it got a little confusing rules-wise. New players really had a hard time understanding it. So they've made similar cards that are a lot easier to understand, a lot simpler since then, that do a very similar thing. But this is awesome. You're going to run it. It's going to be premium removal for you. Otherworldly Journey, and there's a little bit, not a whole lot, but there's a little bit of a blink sort of synergy here and there. Like imagine being able to play this on, say, Primeval Titan. He comes back into play with a +1/+1 counter, already has trample, and now it's a 7/7 trample, and you get to search up 2 more lands when it comes back into the battlefield. Like that type of stuff. It's also an arcane spell, which does matter in a couple circumstances here and there. Very good card. Now, it might not be for all decks, but it's so versatile that I love using abilities like this. Sometimes you put them in your deck, you don't even realize until the moment happens how good they really are. Raise the Alarm. So, quick way to get a couple tokens. I think most players are pretty familiar with this card. I believe it was in Magic 2015, if I'm not mistaken. It was printed a number of times recently, but really fine card, and it's just going to help you get to a quick start and get some tokens in play if you're playing Tokens Matters. Sky Hunter Skirmisher, and here's another card similar to the one we saw before, but this one has flying. So you get to pay 3 for a 1/1 flyer with double strike. That's fine, but what's even better is put some equipment on this guy, and you got yourself a force that your opponent needs to deal with, and quick. Spectral Procession. I've always really liked this card. Those of you who've watched the channel for a while and watched my Dark Ascension pack openings, you know that Lingering Souls is one of my favorite cards. This isn't quite as good as Lingering Souls, but it's pretty good, especially if you have the ability to spend the 3 white mana early in the game. Now, not all limited decks are going to allow you to do that, but you also have the ability to spend colorless mana in exchange for the white. So, end of the day, this card's going to do you well. I probably would play it in almost all builds where I have white. I just really like the fact that you can kind of blitz 3 tokens out there and get in for damage, use them for blockers. They're just so versatile and powerful. Sunlands. So keep in mind this is a sorcery. I think a lot of people see this card and they just think lightning bolt, but it is a sorcery and it can only target non-white creatures. So keep that in mind. That is the drawback that they use for this card, but still a very powerful card. You're going to be more than happy to run it in white. Sunspear Shikari. And here's another one of those, hey, equipment makes this a whole lot better cards. Now, it's a Grizzly Bear on its own, so that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'll play that in limited. But if you do pump it with equipment, now it also gets first strike and lifelink. That's kind of awesome. So this to me just seems like a really fun deck to play. This whole artifact / white deck I think is going to be a blast and limited. Something I'm going to be looking to draft. But what's cool about Modern Masters and including this Modern Masters is this is just one kind of angle. There's just so many different angles when it comes to limited and drafts, and you'll see those as we go through the set review. Taj Nar Swordsmith, and here's just another one of those cards that has that synergy. So he costs 4 for a 2/3, which is okay. That's just fine. But now you have the ability when he enters the battlefield to basically pay some more mana and search up an equipment card. So he's more of a late game play. The only thing I don't like about this guy is there are times where you're going to feel backed into a corner and you're going to have to play him when you have 4 mana because you need a blocker or something, and that's not going to feel real good. But there are also some blink effects, like Otherworldly Journey, for example, that can blink him so you have a chance to go ahead and use this ability again, or maybe use it later if you couldn't use it the first time. So there is some value to be had here. But when he works great. He's going to basically let you tutor for a card and put it directly into play. So it's super card advantage, and there's so many synergies that hopefully you'll be able to take that equipment and put it on one of these creatures that you're really going to get some huge value out of. Toshas Grasp. This is basically disenchant for 1 more mana, but you also gain life off of it. So Disenchant's a great card, and you know there's going to be some good artifacts and enchantments in here. I would not necessarily be against main decking this at certain times playing Modern Masters. I feel like it's good enough to main deck. If you got more stuff going on and you want to save this in your sideboard because you got some other more powerful aggressive things you're doing that are less defensive, then absolutely put it in your sideboard. But if you're on a more defensive build, I'd probably just throw it in there, quite honestly. It's that good. And you're going to gain life, which is going to be great against super aggressive decks or burn decks as well. So another really fine card. And our last card of the day is Wax Main Baku. And this is a 2/2 for 3, but this is one of those Spirit / Arcane Matters cards. And for every Spirit and Arcane that you do cast, it gets a counter. You can convert those counters into basically tapping all your opponent's creatures. So very good end game if you need to go that route and tap creatures down to get your force across for lethal. But very good card. It's at the common level. And I should have mentioned too, the last card was also an Arcane. Another good reason to play it. But yeah, watch out for the Spirits and Arcanes, because even though there's not a whole lot of synergies between them, there's enough at the common level that you're going to be able to get some play out of it and some bonuses out of them. And you want to not forget about them either, because you might not even be thinking you have a Spirit Arcane strategy, but you might have enough commons where it matters, and as you go through the game, it may actually help you win the game. So having said that, that's the conclusion of all the white cards in Modern Masters 2015. Over the next few days, we'll be looking at the whole set, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So please remember to like and subscribe. As always, have a great day.